All right, Karl, welcome back to the show. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
I want you to know, apparently, the word has gone out that you are now the actual host of this. I've brought you on enough that there's apparently the dissidents arguing for a coup. So I figure, you know what, I can't let Karl get too powerful, right?
I
So I
pledge
brought on
my
another guy.
loyalty to Jay Burden for the record.
Well, good, because I have a dead man switch, Karl, with all of the series of falsely manufactured images of you at Little St. James. So who knows, right? If I suddenly disappear and those pop out on the internet, I'll figure out what happened. But in all seriousness, right, we do have a guest, a friend of mine, Ardwolf. Thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this is going to be a little bit different than the normal live shows. It's going to be a little bit more topical. We're going to touch on a couple things. A guest here, as you know, he has a small FFL business, right? And we're talking about one, obviously, the 2A situation in our state of Virginia, but also this kind of assault on small businesses. Some of this is immediate and legislative. Some of this is broader trends, things that make it difficult for normal middle class people to start a business, right? To do something pro social. And of course, I think people are familiar with the broad strokes of what happened electorally in Virginia. If not, use Google, you can figure it out. But I'll throw it to you, man, just as kind of a a broad overview of what you do, and then maybe if you could talk a little bit about the the legislative impact of this most recent election.
Absolutely. So I'm a home-based FFL dealer, and I imagine a lot of your younger audience is probably already familiar with what that is. But for those of them who are not familiar, so when you want to buy a gun, you can either go to a gun store, so a brick and mortar store, commercially zoned building, a business with guns all over the wall and $10 an hour employees running the counter. You go in, you pick out a gun, and you buy it. Well, actually, there's thousands of people around the country who have the exact same licensing to sell guns and make guns that these gun stores have. But instead of a commercially zoned business, a retail store, they'll actually run the business out of their home. There's really no difference administratively or legally in the status of a home-based FFL dealer. So when it comes to the service we provide, it tends to be a little bit more bespoke, a little bit more tailored towards the clientele in the local community. So you could have a home-based FFL maybe out in rural Virginia that really just has a uh, kitchen countertop style. You go in, you fill out some paperwork, and it's very casual. And then might have a home-based FFL who maybe takes it to another level. Maybe fortifies part of their home, plans to have a much higher volume of business, and maybe has a professionally formatted website with a catalog on it. And then you have everything in between. But the key difference is a home-based FFL is really more for a customer who knows exactly what they want and they want no other BS. So they don't want to stand in line. They don't want to, uh, you know, do paper forms that take forever to fill out, and then maybe the employee isn't entirely competent, or they're distracted, or when these customers are only using the business for a transfer, maybe they just want somebody who receives the box, notifies the customer same day that it's ready for pickup, whereas in a gun store, they're too busy for that. Maybe it takes 5 days before they even think to notify the customer their gun's ready for pickup. Well, for these people who don't want all that BS, they don't want all the fluff, they just want to pick up their gun and get out of there. Home-based FFLs are the perfect option for them. And so I started this business in 2019 after doing a couple transfers. I actually myself went to a home-based FFL, and I figured, you know what, I could do this a little more efficiently. I could apply some of my real-world career experience, maybe project management, organizational skills, and I could do this a little better. I could do a little I could do it a little more efficiently, and maybe I could have a nicer website. And so I just rolled up my sleeves, applied some of that true American grit. I converted my garage into an office and a workshop, and replaced the garage door with a reinforced cinder block wall with skiff rated steel doors. Bought a bunch of safes, and just got to it. And then early on, I started with WordPress sites, just kind of exploring options that are low cost, and that was a little rough. It's very difficult to have a nice catalog unless it's being professionally managed by a serious IT company. So eventually, uh, I started searching for software companies that provide this service, and I landed on one that does it specifically for gun businesses. It was very easy to set up. So I eventually grew to have a full-on professional website with a catalog so customers could order whatever they want from me. But the true bread and butter of the business is transfers. It's, hey, it's great that you have a catalog and all, but frankly, I just want to buy my suppressor. I want to buy my gun from somewhere else. I found a great deal, and I just want you to do the transfer. And that's where I add the value. I get people in and out the door anywhere from 7 to 15 minutes usually. And I just do it on a rolling basis, all by appointment, day in, day out, and eventually grew to have a very good reputation as a result. It's a key niche service, and it fits in really well in the area that I service, which is Northern Virginia.
So, two things there. One, you mentioned, skills from your other career. And, knowing a bunch of guys that do this, one of the things that I've realized is for most of them, it's a second job, right? It's a side hustle. It's something they do, to supplement their income that's theirs. And one, if you could speak to that a little bit. And then two, right, we're going to talk about a lot of the legislative issues, that have cropped up in this business while you're exiting it. And so it bears mentioning, what are your customers like? And are those the same customers who tend to do bad things with firearms?
Yes. So great point. So my customers are generally mid to high income professionals. There are very few, let's just say, troublemakers that make their way in. And now, why is that? Well, it's because I guess partly the kinds of people who are going to look for a home-based FFL in the first place are maybe a little bit more savvy about how guns even work, meaning like the gun buying process even works. Whereas if you have a brick and mortar store that's open to the public, it's open to foot traffic, kind of any person can just kind of wander in and say, oh, it's a gun store. This is where I go to buy guns. All my services are done by appointment only. Nobody is ever welcome to just show up and walk in. So I do have people, uh, I have had people kind of randomly show up thinking it's a gun store. And I guess the fact that this is a single family home in a quiet suburban neighborhood was not enough of a hint that, hey, this is not like a gun store in that sense. But, there's ways around that. You just kind of clearly list your business as FFL services by appointment. Don't call yourself a gun store. And that kind of helps weed out the riffraff. But no, all my customers, out of all of them, just to give an idea of the scale of the business that I do, I've had I've done transfers for 8,500 items over the past 5 to 6 years. I've had maybe 4,000 unique customers, so a lot of repeat customers, but maybe 4,000 unique individuals. And I would say if I had to kind of just guess, I would say 99% of them were totally cool. Did not give me any kind of bad vibes whatsoever. And it was all just business, maybe a little small talk, and they just come in and out and don't give me any trouble. Out of that very large volume of transfers, okay, what can possibly go wrong? Well, somebody could commit a crime with the gun that you, the FFL dealer, transferred. And then there's a follow-up investigation with the state police. But that's usually very simple. They show up and say, hey, we need the records for this guy, the firearm transaction record, which is the form you fill out when you do a firearm transfer. And in the state of Virginia, we have a separate form for the background check. So you simply provide those, and then they can subpoena you as a witness if necessary. So to put it in perspective, with all the transfers that I've done, I've had maybe 10 to 15 where I subsequently had to provide records to the police. And I've had zero, well, I've been subpoenaed, but none of them ever panned out where I actually had to show up in court. So I've had zero court appearances as a result. And at least one of my customers did kind of a high profile thing. I guess he was driving around speeding and shooting at cops, which is pretty bad. And he was eventually apprehended. I believe is in prison now. But even there, I mean, it was kind of open and shut. I never had to deal with anything. I imagine it's a lot worse for brick and mortar stores, just with the way their business is set up. They're going to have a lot more random people walking in, a lot more troublemakers, and a lot more issues. Now, on the side hustle angle, so that's where maybe I'm lucky, right? This area and the service I provide really is for people who have money to spend. So I'm more likely to make sales, and frankly, wealthy people are just better. I mean, they're polite. They're not penny pinching. They're not gonna say, oh well, I could buy this from you, but if I spend an extra 2 hours researching, I could save $8 if I go with this other business, right? You'll have a lot less of that. And again, they're generally know how to carry themselves. They're respectful. They respect your time and your business. And in return, I treat everybody very fairly. I'm very professional and polite with everybody that I interact with. And I think people appreciate that, contrasted with a full-time brick and mortar gun business where, there's high costs. So the costs of the products are going to be much higher when you purchase them in store. And then, like we covered earlier, the actual third-party transfer services they provide are not going to be as efficient. And again, you're not interacting with the owner who's put his heart and soul into the business directly. You're interacting with a wage employee who, and there's going to be varying degrees of competence there. When you deal with me, you're dealing with me only. There's nobody else. I know every aspect of this business. I've done thousands of transfers, and I've kind of dealt with all kinds of clients with all kinds of different paperwork. So generally, I'm going to be quick to know, okay, here's what you need in order to get this transfer done. So when I say that I bring some outside experience into this, I mean, that can mean a lot of things, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into being a truly effective home-based FFL servicing maybe mid to higher end clients. Communication skills, organizational skills, understanding a thing or two about things like cloud computing, website design, inventory management, data science, right? So if you want to sell guns these days, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, you have to understand data science. And then beyond that, there's just a certain way to present yourself, right? Everything's neat, orderly, clean, and it's quiet. It's one-on-one. It's personal, and people like that. People will even pay a little bit more for that kind of experience than they would just going to a gun store.
Well, and one of the things that you mentioned, and we can speak on this briefly before we get into the legislative angle, and we'll finally bring Karl back instead of just making him sit in the podcast cuck chair. But there's an interesting angle to which guys like you, the sort of middle level, right, kind of small businessmen, are being squeezed out, right, by the firearms industry writ large. Now, obviously, this certainly matters with proposed laws in Virginia, massively expanding the sort of lawfare that can be brought to bear on guys like you, but also just on the purchasing level, right, where everything has become very commoditized. And look, like, I'll be honest, I do this, right? If I'm looking for a certain item, I'm smart enough to figure out what the UPC is, how to look that up on Google. And find whoever's going to save me a marginal 60 cents. Similar with, the FFL. And again, there are, large distributors, I'm sure you know them better than I do, who, because of economies of scale can basically win that game, either, honestly or dishonestly. So to what degree do you see there being sort of a, high and low squeeze versus kind of the mid-sized businesses in that industry?
Yeah, great question. So let's start with the top down, right? So I don't know if this is in good faith or in bad faith, but the gun industry, right? If we're gonna make an archetype, they're pretending like it's still the year 1997, uh, and the supply chain works as follows: we invest millions of dollars to uh, develop these guns. We make bulk sales to hopefully just the government and the military and the police because they have tons of money to spend, and they're going to put in large orders, and that keeps things simple for us. Oh, by the way, there's also we're also in America, so there's also a big civilian market. So let's make some sales there as well. And the way that works is there's gun stores. There are stores that have an inventory, and they have employees, and they have costs, and people go to the gun store to buy the guns, and that's about it. And so that's sort of how they set up the whole paradigm. And now inherent in that, if that really were the way things work, and there is no such thing as online sales and people understanding what UPC codes are and understanding how to use search aggregators that find the lowest possible retail deals on those UPC codes. If it really did work in the traditional sense, well, then it would make sense to uh, to just establish an MSRP, and then what's called a minimum advertised price, which is we, the manufacturer, will ban you and cut you off from the wholesale distributors if you list any deal below this magic number for this product. Okay. And the ostensible reason for that is, well, we're trying to protect the brick and mortar businesses. They have costs, they've made investments to be a gun store. And it would be uncool of us to allow people to just, when all said and done, make a net profit of $8 per item, but make the most sales as a result and take advantage of that economy of scale. So to put that in simple terms, the industry is saying, hey, we set these minimum advertised prices, and you can only list at this price, and it's kind of expected that you should keep an inventory, right? They really push that, like, keep an inventory. The more you buy, the more you save, etc. Well, here's the problem with that. Here's what happens when you, as a home-based FFL dealer or even a brick and mortar gun store, try to keep an inventory. You're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars on that inventory, and then you're going to sit on it and eventually sell it at a loss. Now, why is that? It's because it's a game of whack-a-mole, right? There's going to be these small warehouse operations that crop up all over the place, and they'll sneak in the products at a lower price, closer to what they're willing to make. That's under the minimum advertised pricing policy. Okay. Now, once you're on their radar, there's these software companies that I'm sure approach the gun industry as consultants, and they say, hey, there's all these dealers trying to list your products below your policy, and our web crawlers scan for these websites and these deals and flag them so that you can keep these policies in place. And once you're on that radar, you'll start getting these threatening emails if you ever list anything below what's called MAP, minimum advertised price. So from the top, it's let's recap, right? Okay, you want to be a gun dealer, great. Stock an inventory, because any legitimate gun dealer would stock an inventory. Why wouldn't you? And also, don't you dare ever list anything below this price. Now, here's what's unfair about that. When industry sells to wholesalers and they make their bulk sales, they've already made their money. So the transaction is complete now, as far as they're concerned. But when you buy guns as a dealer from a wholesaler, those manufacturers are still trying to control that relationship with your customers and dictate to you what price they're selling it at. Now, again, they're saying it's because, well, we need to protect small businesses that have costs and you can't undercut them. But here's the problem with that. First of all, the margins are insane, right? Like, and I'm going to pick on Sig Sauer, the most aggressive MAP policy enforcers. It's like I don't know for sure how big the margin is from manufacturing cost to wholesale price, but wholesale to minimum advertised retail price is like $400 or $500. Now, what's the service that's really being provided? Well, you're doing paperwork for people, you're keeping an inventory, and you're selling the gun. So it's completely unreasonable. And I suspect it's because they want the downstream prices to remain high for two reasons. One, I guess it helps their books. So it helps them value their future production and quarterly projections with shareholders, or maybe it having your products priced highly maybe raises your profile with the public, makes you come across more like a premium brand. I'm sure those things come into play. But at the end of the day, when you're trying to be a home-based FFL dealer, you need to keep those overhead costs low. You don't want to sit on an inventory. You don't want to buy 10 SIG MPXs and then see all these other retailers who are under the web crawler radar maybe selling them for like $30, $50, $60 on top. You're never going to make a sale because everyone's going to know, actually, we could get it for a lot less than you. So you're stuck listing these expensive products at a very high price. And you have to somehow thread that needle. You have to communicate to people, well, actually, we could sell it for lower, but I can't tell you how much until you reach out to me. Average online customer isn't going to bother. They're just going to click somewhere else and buy somewhere else. So that would be the top-down squeeze. And then, from the other end, a lot of the younger generation, I suspect, they understand, like you said, they understand UPC codes. They know how to search gun.deals. They know how to find deals posted on Reddit. They're maybe under the radar. And actually, there's retailers who game that system. They'll sell guns at a huge loss, specifically just to build up their profile, and they'll call it like an advertising cost. And then so people on social media, let's say Reddit, they'll see those deals, and then once that deal occurs, they will never buy that same product, even at a price where you could even make a slight profit, because it's been ingrained. Hey, these things can sell for this low. Why would you ever pay a penny more? And we're talking under dealer cost. So really the only way to have a viable business model is the transfer services at the end of the day. Now, these are generalizations. Not all manufacturers are the same. Some are more reasonable than others. And a lot of times the margins will balance out in a way that the price that you sell it at is still very reasonable when you take into account that you're also doing the transfer for free as part of the sale. And that's sort of where it lands. But if you try to open up a gun business, you will fail. Okay. Unless you have, and this doesn't apply to people with millions of dollars of investment backing. This doesn't apply to people who already have some kind of major operations going on. But if you're just a small time business person, unless you have a range, or unless you have some kind of other service that you bring to the table that people need, like if you're an expert AK builder, or if you do Cerakoting, if you're just trying to buy and sell guns as a business model, you will fail if you try to get a commercially zoned property anywhere with in any kind of area that has a substantial population density. It's just been gamed out. Your local costs and other like costs, facility costs, overhead costs, that's just going to ruin any possible margin you can make, because again, you're being squeezed between industry and the customer base.
Well, and to that point, right, it's squeezing out a part of the market that is both useful to customers, right? They get a better product or better experience that isn't directly trackable in dollars and cents, right? For instance, I was complaining to these guys about, not that long ago when I went to do some, NFA paperwork. I was stuck there for 2.5 hours, right? It was a horrible experience. I should have been in and out there in half an hour at most, right? But like, okay, fair enough. That might have been the cheapest guy in town, but it was a horrible experience. I wasted a ton of time. Incidentally, right? Like these are jobs for, normal middle class pro social people, right? People who are interested in building something on their own, providing a service to their community and, again, doing more than kind of simply, their soulless corporate job, right? Actually building something. So I want to pivot slightly to the new legislation, right? And some of this will be hyper specific to Virginia, but I thought we'd bring Karl on because, look, man, I'm not trying to tell everyone where you live, but you're behind enemy lines, right? You
Yeah.
have gone through a similar process.
Yeah,
And
very recently. Yes.
I think it might be good to talk about, if you would, Karl, the gap between the stated and revealed preference for these sort of, anti 2A laws, right? Because the stated preference, like our, Bangladeshi AG, Art Wolf, is all about safety, right? It's all about, scary, assault weapons, which, possess some incel into a, a murderous rage. But that's very different than what actually is brought in. So I'll kick it to you, Karl, and then maybe, Art Wolf and I can react afterwards.
Great. So, in sum, what we have seen in areas that were very good on 2A until let's walk through a imaginary scenario. Imagine, if you will, everyone out there, you have a actual contentious elections where there's trading back and forth between Republicans and Democrats for dominance, and you have a pretty substantial, like, what we used to call blue dog Democrat population, where they're pretty normal, working people, generally white, with like hunting backgrounds and stuff, but let's say they're in a union type industry and or that's dominated by a union, so they're members of the unions, and they're like, yeah, it makes sense, I like having a union, there's good things about that, and they vote Democrat for all the old kind of classic normal reasons, and they don't like a lot of the kind of stereotypical things about conservative politicians, especially that some of the more performative elements are like GWAT related stuff, right? As we get into the more modern era. So what eventually happens is that elements those populations are the public face. This is the base, and this is what we're doing. We're doing all this for you for all these good, thoughtful reasons. But the actual political machine, before too long, starts saying, well, what we need to do is secure total victory forever as our primary condition, and then we can ram everything down their throats that we want, and we'll put a nice face on it. But what we're really trying to do is eliminate our opposition, first of all, and then punish the chuds who oppose us. And so, the chuds who oppose us like small arms, right? And they don't actually bother people or cause problems with these weapons. Our clients are the ones, by and large, that fit that bucket. And so we will never acknowledge, it's not the 80s or the early 90s where we're going to acknowledge that the problem is coming from our client, a small segment of our client base. Instead, we're going to scapegoat our enemies for all these things, and they just oppose safety, and they don't really care about, they're willing to sacrifice all the children in the world. And really what they're doing is they're trying to set us up for conditions of anarcho-tyranny where they legalize crime, and they outlaw the means of self-defense, or let's just say very carefully, like opposition to same, right, and opposition to state policies, as well as enforcement of those state policies. Because again, Don Quavius with his Jay Burden approved Draco is not a problem, even though he is the problem, right? And so, defending yourself against him, we're going to send the AG after you, who might have your children, murdered. It's really quite insane. And when you put it really at what the table stakes are, they'll accuse you of making it up, but in reality, that's the revealed preference. Like, you don't get rid of all the gun stores and then throw the guy out on the street, after he's arrested for attempted murder, like within 2 hours, and then he kills someone again and be like, oopsies. That's been the case in my state for about 6 years now. And so, yes, getting rid of all the gun shops, restricting the means of self-defense, and let's say appropriate collective self-defense in the traditional sense, that goes back to a well-established background in our state, from the early settlement until, let's say, the 1920s. Like, that is bad. And real street crime isn't happening, but when it happens to you, it's good. And if you defend yourself, we'll crush you from the state level, because like your actual community and your sheriff might be opposed to that. Your sheriff who's elected by you and actually has to deal with crime. Like we've lately had actual sheriffs on the street, like doing police work in a huge number of jurisdictions, because they have to, because their staffing has been so bad, and keeping staff is really bad, a real big problem for them. But they're in this contentious relationship with the state government, particularly screeching females in the legislature accordingly. And so it's this struggle, and you really see it as a form of political warfare after some time passes, and just the naked, obvious, again, like you put it, revealed preference versus what their stated preference is.
Well, and to that point, and obviously, we're still in very early, stages of,
Yes.
Aggressive decline in my state, but we've seen that exact same squeeze. Ardwolf, I'll let you chime in a second, but obviously, the anti-2A stuff has been punishing and needlessly punitive, right? So, for instance, you have the sort of AWB you would expect. The most recent version would make it effectively 1 year in prison for owning a magazine over 12 rounds. An odd number, I guess. Because we're really passionate about 40 caliber Glocks, but cool, I guess. Point is, right, again, obviously this sort of needlessly punitive thing, similarly restricting how much land you have to shoot a gun. I mean, Ardwolf, you can think of guys with, at or around 5 acres who shoot guns in a completely safe way, or, might have some pests to take care of. Well, that's a crime now. Any number of things that are, relatively normal and in no way threatening have been made crimes. Whereas, there's no more mandatory minimum for, burglary or rape or any other number of crimes, right? They're decriminalizing public vagrancy, like all of these sort of, anarcho-tyranny-esque laws. I'll kick it to you, man, if you think I've missed anything there.
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say, Karl summed it up perfectly. He articulated it perfectly. That is exactly what is starting to happen in Virginia now. So there's really nothing I can add to that. Well put. But what I will say is this. So first of all, the mandate. So our new governor is Miss Spamberger. She was elected because Donald Trump and Elon Musk went directly after federal employees, and then by extension, federal contractors. There's a massive population of federal employees and contractors in clustered around Northern Virginia. So if you look at a map of Virginia, for those who don't know, the entire state is quote unquote normal folk. and then Richmond, Charlottesville, and Northern Virginia are kind of blue cities. There might be an oversimplification, but that's essentially what it is, right? So, but they have the highest population density, and then through the electoral processes, they end up um, owning the entire state. Well, so Trump and Doge pissed off the entire Northern Virginia community by going after federal contractors and federal employees. And then I think in parallel to that, the major election platforms were running on affordability and abortion, right? So, you're going to have all kinds of Democrat voters in the state focused on these key issues, but maybe less so. Maybe only 5 to 10% of them actually think that we should reduce mandatory minimums for violent crime, sexual crime, etc. Maybe a lot of them own guns and they own magazines with more than 10 round capacity. Well, it doesn't matter. The Democrat Party in the state has seized this election victory on these key issues and now are using it as an excuse to steamroll the entire population with the most aggressive, extreme policies you can imagine. So I won't cover them all, but the one that most directly affects the gun industry, I would say, I won't read the whole thing, but it's the title of the bill. It's proposed, it's still in committee, but we're going to assume everything will get rubber stamped. Firearm industry members standards of responsible conduct, civil liability. And ultimately, it provides that firearm industry members may not knowingly or recklessly create, maintain, or contribute to a public nuisance, as defined in the bill through the sale, manufacturing, etc. of guns. So what that means is essentially, hey, have you in any way, shape, or form been affected by any kind of a gun crime? Great. File suit, and our judicial industry will help you punish the gun industry with lawsuits. That essentially increases your liability risk. And even if you win these cases with these frivolous lawsuits, you're out tens of thousands of dollars. The process is the punishment. I would say that's the real death sentence for the gun industry in Virginia. The only thing that's going to be left is major big box stores that can afford the increased costs and risk to continue operating. It's going to reduce access to home-based FFLs, obviously. Guns are going to cost more. They're adding sales tax to guns, which makes it virtually impossible to compete with out-of-state retailers. But then beyond that, I did want to touch on the attitudes of the Democrat voters, right? So many of my customers are Democrats, and they have assault weapons. They have very cool, expensive assault weapons that they love, and they have huge collections of them. And they have many, many, many magazines in their possession that have capacities more than 10 rounds. So you might wonder, well, gee, if this is so important to you and you've invested all this money in this hobby and pastime of yours, how can you possibly, actively vote for this to happen? And it just boils down to cognitive dissonance and denial. And look, like I said, I'm polite to everybody. I'm professional, right? I don't grill people like, hey, you voted Democrat. Well, how do you like that? No, but I do kind of say, hey, what are your thoughts on some of these bills? And it's universally just denial and cognitive dissonance, or just changing the subject, right? Oh, well, the governor is going to veto this. She's not. They're just doing this to appeal to their radical base, but they have no intention of actually getting these passed. I mean, you wouldn't believe the level of denial here. The point is, there is no actual mandate for any of this stuff. Again, it's government jobs, it's abortion, and it's affordability, or just not liking Trump and sticking it to the current administration at the federal level. It is the average person doesn't want any of this stuff, and it's basically getting rammed through because, as Karl put it, they want total victory. They want to remove any form of opposition. So now they're going to redistrict everything. So it'll be like maybe one Republican senator at the state level moving forward, and they want to punish the chuds for their dangerous hobbies. That's really what it boils down to. It's a form of class warfare. I'm sorry, I think you're on mute.
Incredibly professional podcaster. Look, if you guys and I decided to sit around, maybe with a beverage or two, and solve the problem of gun violence, right? This pandemic. There are things that could be done, right? I see another guy who worked as an FFL in chat talking about, straw purchases. And I mean, look, man, I've seen these happen, right? I've seen a rather, well-built young woman there with her boyfriend, where he's picking everything out at the pawn shop. Like, you don't need to be a genius, right? Similarly, if you had really committed to the idea of, banning things to make this go away, well, you wouldn't be going after, $3,000 Belgian rifles and, expensive stuff, right? Because very few people who, knock over liquor stores have, $4 or $5 grand for, cool stuff, right? Generally, it's, cheap garbage. Not saying we should, but clearly, right, it is what you said, Ardwolf, right? It is, we don't like the chuds, make them go away. And also, this plays well to suburban white women, right? That's another part of it as well. So, Karl, I'm curious, right, if you could kind of, share your experience for someone who's, gone through this. How did first the chuds react to, these sort of, aggressive bills? And also, how does this kind of prototypical, liberal gun owner react? Because if I remember correctly, you were sharing a story in a very good episode of Thomas's show, you and Andy Edwards, where you were talking about, driving through the middle of nowhere and, coming upon, kind of your prototypical, Pacific Northwest hippie, armed, traipsing through the woods and, long hair, a beard, and tassels all over, right? Just obviously an amusing anecdote, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Well, so here's a really important thing that people forget about a lot of the times is a huge amount of the push for gun control. There's different eras of gun control, and like if you were to go on Twitter or the platform stupidly renamed X, whatever you want to call it, right now, someone will tell you nobody has tried to outlaw private firearms ownership. That's never happened, and you're delusional. And it's like, no, if you look at all of the various gun control organizations and the stuff that they talked about throughout the 20th century, their goal was total disarmament, total civilian disarmament. Like Feinstein talked about it all the time, Chuck Schumer, like all those people, that they've been very candid about it, but then they always put on a different public face. And in the 60s, it was very brazen. I will point out that the NFA, the reason we have the short-barreled rifle, short-barreled shotgun, is because originally handguns were included in the National Firearms Act of 1934. That was dropped because it was just untenable. So anyhow, when we think about this and the different people that are talking about this, a lot of the people pushing for the most egregious forms of gun control right now in these state legislatures are relatively recent immigrants from, let's say, India or Bangladesh or Pakistan. It's incredibly common. And I'm not saying that they're the first people who've ever pushed for gun control. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is gun control against the American population is incredibly popular for those people. And if you've ever, let's say, encountered them in political discussions online, you would understand why. And the thing to understand about the places that they come from is that gun laws are for other people and they break the law. That's just the way other cultures work. In the vast majority of cases, like you have strict gun control, but like their political parties will have weapons and then they will arm themselves around the time of elections, let's say. And it's incredibly common around the world. Your leopard skin looks lovely, by the way, Mr. Burden. It looks really cool.
Thank you.
So
See, I've just decided to adapt to our new environment and sort
yeah,
of set myself up as sort of a colonial ruler esque figure. So I think I will start paying for some someone to fan me. During these, I haven't quite figured out all the details, but yeah, I appreciate that, Carl.
a few more suggestions. So yes, a nice fan, some sort of palm fan leaf in the background, or fan palm, whatever they call them.
Mm-hmm.
A spear, a cow skin shield, and then the Draco goes in front of it. Um, so anyway,
I actually
um,
have, well,
yeah.
I actually have a cowskin shield somewhere around there from my great grandfather's adventuring. I'll see if
Oh,
it's
that's
still in decent
wonderful.
shape.
That's wonderful. So the way that it actually plays out as these restrictions happen is that one, the chuds all rush to buy something that they want to get. And if I can make some recommendations to you all, if you already have like ARs and AKs and like an FAL or whatever, and handguns, just buy magazines, because the magazine restriction is what really eats into you. And if you have a restriction where you'll still be able to buy some variant of a gun that you want to get, but the magazines are going to be a problem, and you're going to buy it the next couple of years, buy the magazines. And when Karl Dahl tells you to buy magazines, I'm saying like buy at least like 10 magazines for a rifle, and at least 6 magazines for a pistol. That's just how I think. Then you look at the ammunition restrictions, yada yada. If you already have stuff that you can work with, there's ways around things. But the truth is that people just violate these laws all the time. The people that push them, and like if you were to go to for example, a store run by a Bangladeshi person who voted for this individual in Virginia who's pushing these documents. He has illegal firearms that were brought in from out of state because he doesn't follow the laws. Like that's just the way that it works, and people get busted for that stuff around here all the time. So like people really need to change their point of their frame of mind about the way that people follow or violate the laws. And they're pushing these laws to control you, not themselves, and they just ignore the law. So I know I'm kind of rambling here. What really happens though is that you will have, how do you fight back against this stuff? One, there's the legal means, and the other one is not illegal means, but it's more like public rallies and things like that to draw attention to things. And where you see successes, like for example, Oregon had a very broad gun control law put into place that was a little too broad, and actual implementation of the rules by were put onto the counties, and then the counties actually ended up suing over it, and the lawsuit it basically required some additional laws to be pushed through, which again, with total control by the Democratic Party, because again they implement mail-in voting, etc., so that they can and then also broad like motor voter type registration rules where it's up to the state, and it requires the feds to come in and clean up the voter rolls, or not, right? We just had like 1 million fake or dead registrations removed. That is more than, like, all of these things are always more than enough to sway elections, because what happens is that the actual party machines at the county level just stuff the ballot box to get the results that they want, and then the state level would never question it because they're controlled by the same party. So that's the future of Virginia if you guys can't stop it, or have a severe federal intervention, which is hopefully what'll happen. But then you also have the you guys had the rallies around 8 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, where gun owners were coming out and basically doing goon patrol in front of the Capitol, which can be effective, but that's only if you have a responsive legislature. In which case, you don't. And my guess is that would, as a right winger, my belief is that would not be tolerated now, and in fact, it would probably be a big problem. But so that becomes I wouldn't recommend it, but do what you got to do kind of a situation, because it's a waste of time around here to do that stuff. So it's all done in the courts, legislature, and then finding little niches that allow you to work around them.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of an interesting thing as well. A lot of the people I see the most disturbed by this, and who knows, Hardwolf, maybe this is a cope, but I have sort of I'm cultivating an air of detachment, right? Like the Trump Buddha statue, right? I have done all I can do, and yet this is what it is. But I think a large part of the reason you see conservatives so deeply upset about this, like some of it's very legitimate, right? Their home is being ruined. I get that. But I think another part of it is that they haven't really figured out yet that the government isn't theirs, that this thing is not run for their benefit. And I wonder if that's part of the freak out we're seeing from kind of the good-hearted boomer cons. Do you think I'm correct there, Ardwolf, or am I missing something?
Yes, 100%. So once again, yeah, Carl's really just articulated everything perfectly. So first of all, this speaks to a much, much, much deeper, more fundamental issue of what this country even is, right? So this is not a good faith disagreement between, I would say, even between countrymen, right? I don't want to paint the past as having, I don't want to look through rose-colored glasses at the past, right? But I don't know. I get the sense that prior generations were they were all Americans. Maybe some were more progressive than others, but they fundamentally agreed on more things. And yes, I mean they did push. I mean they banned alcohol and they tried to ban all kinds of things that didn't end up going through back in 1934. But I would say to a greater degree, the country was more unified and people were less alienated than they are now. And so I could see how in the past one might think, oh, these Democrats, they're so stupid. We just got to engage in more debates and win them over. And eventually, it's like Will Buckley kind of approach. Like we got to just be respectable and lead by example, and surely they'll come around to our way of seeing things. This is not the case at all. This is not a good faith disagreement. This is not based on ignorance. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They have all kinds of these legislators have all kinds of bugmen just doing industry research on their behalf and really feeding them like how do you most effectively screw with your average gun owner, both in direct ways, just broadside attacks on things like owning assault weapons, owning magazines, but also all these peripheral ways like banning concealed carry in parks. And and then I guess what I would really want to ask, let's say a system believer is it just ignorance when you have a trifecta of number one, reducing mandatory minimums on violent crimes, number two, reducing legal gun ownership and access to guns by messing with the industry, and then number three, removing qualified immunity from police, meaning all the competent, effective police officers are just going to leave the state and go find jobs in other departments. What possible reason would you have for wanting these three things to come together, right? And so, unfortunately, our state is full of both gullible conservatives and gullible Democrats who still see this as, oh, it'll sort itself out in the courts. I mean, yes, we did have, the Chud parade in Richmond recently. I think the turnout wasn't nearly as good as it was a few years prior when there was another attempt. Things are different now. They hold a solid majority. There was a blue wave. They're redistricting to prevent either the House, State Senate, or governorship from ever becoming Republican again. So there will never be a barrier again, and they want it all. This is not, and yeah, yes, of course, we have the court system in place, but here's the problem, right? Those things take years to resolve themselves. So if I pass
Yeah.
50 gun laws all at once, or whatever, let's not even say 50, let's say five really, really effective anti-gun laws. How long is it going to take for those things to weave their way through, through our court system? Even if we win one per year, that's just 5 years for them to pass even more laws that are going to have to go through the courts, right? So it's just a fundamentally, it's an unfair paradigm. It's stacked in the left's favor, and I don't really see any effective way of changing it. So it is very much like, yeah, I think all you have left is the Buddha statue approach. And I guess what most directly affects people is you are going to see a change in your day-to-day life. And by the time that change arrives, it'll be too late. Now, people who are a little bit more savvy or maybe understand, or maybe I'd say they're a little more realistic about the way politics works, right? And maybe we're a little bit more terminally online looking at videos about crimes and civil unrest in other places. We kind of know what's coming, right? We're going to have tent cities full of drug addicts. I have what's so tragic about this is I love Virginia, right? I love everything from the geography. I love the climate, and I love Virginians. And I also love what Virginia represents historically. And I love my home. I put my heart and soul into creating a home here for my family. I don't want to leave. But what's going to happen is I have this beautiful creek near my home where you could take a nice, 3 or 4 mile walk. And in the heart of Northern Virginia, you can't even see a building. You see nothing but trees and a trail and a creek. And I love taking my dogs there. Well, how long before we get MS-13 gangbangers hanging out there? How long before we have drug addicts hanging out there who are going to be increasingly bold in approaching your family when you're not there? And guess what? There's signs at the entrances to at all the entrances to this park and trail, as there are in many other places in Virginia, that say no firearms allowed. There's a picture of a Beretta pistol with a big line through it, and it says having a valid concealed carry permit is not an exception to this rule. So it just kind of, they're really screaming at you with a bullhorn. We don't like you. We don't care if you die. We don't want you to be able to protect yourself. And we're going to remove any barriers to the criminal element in society from victimizing you. I don't understand how that's still not enough for, I would say, a critical mass of voters. They still very much believe that, well, this is just an honest disagreement. It's politics. It is what it is. But it'll sort itself out. I don't see it that way.
Yeah, it's an extraordinarily grim situation, to be perfectly honest. We have a few super chats, just a couple, very generous. The first, which I don't know if I can read really much of this at all, but Cordy YYZ asked me, is this like a BBL for Final Fantasy fans? Confused, but I'll take your money. So here's my money, bi-monthly donation to the distant right NPR. Any plans to expand to Canada? No, for any number of reasons, right? But I do appreciate the donation nonetheless. And then Arthur and Callie, a very good Substacker, asked, any action so far from the NRA and other 2A groups against proposed Virginia legislation beside more fundraising emails? I haven't seen a thing. Hardwolf, have you noticed anything on that front?
No, not at all.
It's going to be GOA and other groups that do this kind of stuff as specialized. That's all we've seen locally.
And to be fair, effectively, a large part of this is that nothing's really been signed. These are moving through committee.
Yeah.
So I hate to side with those sort of organizations who I view as largely feckless. But to be honest, what are they going to do? Right? Like literally, what are they going to do?
What
These
can
aren't
they
laws
do?
yet.
What can they do?
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, even after the laws pass, right? There's even if the Supreme Court steps in on one or two of these key issues and resolves it, it doesn't matter, right? They have the power at the state level, right? Didn't the Supreme Court pass Bruin? Can you get a concealed carry permit today in New York City? I still think they found a way to prevent that from happening, right? If the state wants to make life miserable for law-abiding taxpayers, they will. And no amount of favorable court rulings is going to change that. The point is, they're in power and they don't like you and they want to make you miserable. And then you, as the opposition or the dissidents, you basically have to decide, okay, am I just going to continue to live here in my home that I love and just take more precautions and just suffer through it, or am I going to leave? Those really are your two options ultimately.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I am here for the long haul, one way or the other. So I guess I've made my choice. Other people are free to make theirs. But we are fast approaching on time. Ardwolf, I guess you really don't have anything to promote. I see you on Substack sometimes, but just kind of in my comments. Is there anything you want to direct people towards?
Well, I guess if you want to get a firearm transferred or purchase something within the next 3 months, you could visit ardwolfsolutions.com and browse our catalog. But other than that, hey, it's ultimately a sin to fall into despair, right? There is a sin of despair. You have to have faith. You have to believe that ultimately good, honest people will prevail. And that's where I'm at. I don't have any easy answers. I don't even have any practical advice. But just ultimately, this is wrong, and it can't continue. And it will end eventually. We will find a way to just be able to live normal, decent lives. I don't have an answer as to how exactly that will happen. Only that I have faith and certainty that it will ultimately happen.
I'll kick it to Karl, who will tell you to buy book. You should buy book. But we've had 2 more super chats come in. Feel free to keep sending them. I will take your money and read your questions for as long as you want to keep it up. ZH-1. Before Trump became president, libertarians asked Trump to pardon a guy who ran a drug website. Trump pardoned that person. What did gun rights groups ask Trump to do before he became president? If they did anything, I am not aware of it.
Nothing.
I would say that might be a slightly unfair characterization of the Silk Road guy. I don't view him entirely that negatively, Russ Ulbricht. But a note for another day. Gray pilled ending. I didn't know what FFLs were. Okay, I see the joke now. Trying to be funny. Did you hear that Toronto police will not comply with the national gun ban? I did not hear that. The Canadians are in a very, very weird situation because, again, Canada's not a real country anymore. I'm sorry to break this to you. Canada exists in opposition to the American political establishment. Okay, in opposition. They exist in relation to the American political establishment. So, for instance, you guys got a gun ban because of American domestic politics. Sorry about that. That sucks. Doesn't make sense. Seems to be incredibly punitive. But you know what? At least guys on reservations still have clapped out Chinese SKSs. But yeah, I hope the Toronto police helps y'all out because clearly you need it. Karl, links, where can people find you?
karldahl.substack.com or buy book on Amazon. Actually, 2 books, Faction and Faction with the Crusaders. Thanks for having me. I am a big fan of the home-based FFL. It is, in my experience, almost always a much more wonderful experience than dealing with a retailer, unless you have like a really good one. Support whoever is actually good in your area. For you, provides a good experience. Help keep them in business. Thank you.
I will say that is a great message, one that I largely agree with. But there is a genuine benefit to being the most upstanding customer at a horrible hole in the wall pawn shop, because you will get
True.
special treatment like you would not believe. It is the firearms equivalent of having a coolie to fan you down while you podcast in front of your leopard skin. I it's a experience I wouldn't recommend for everyone, but there's an upside to the true low end of the market as well. One more. Oh shoot. I can't, Big Ben, I can't put that up. Sorry. Exact X comment on from all on why it's not a federal crime to employ or rent to illegals with 10K per incident fine. Millions would self-deport within 6 months. I mean, that's true. If that were the law and if it were enforced, millions of people would leave. However, no one actually wants that. And when I say no one, I don't mean like you and I, X, or anyone here. No one wants that because, as we found out with conservative luminary Berlin Hollyhand, renting to illegal immigrants is a phenomenal business model, right? Both on the small scale for people, slumlords, and also for large, institutional investors, basically, right? Yeah, the Ajar Bazaar has a more direct answer, but similarly with employment, it's the same thing, right? There are a lot of industries that depend on that, and there simply isn't the money to make it happen, to be honest. I'll kick it to you guys if you have other thoughts on that.
I'm just nodding my head furiously in agreement. It's that simple. If if the system wanted these people to self-deport, they would make it so that they would self-deport. A system is what it does. It's that simple. What are the effects of the current policies? That's what the system wants.
So true.
Depending on that, yeah.
I will say that I have seen locally, and like flagrantly abusive businesses have been cracked down on in places. Not nearly enough. Not nearly enough. Can I tell one super quick home
sure,
FFL
man.
story?
Look, okay. I'm unemployed. What do you think I have to do?
We have several things in common, Mr. Burden. So it's funny. The very first home FFL transfer I did was very interesting. The gentleman running the business was part of my state gun club, and they would run gun shows through the club just so that they could put some guidelines in that kept the Taurus G2C ATI AR pistol and Draco buyer demographic away from us. Colloquially. Anyway, and so I descended into this house in a neighborhood that my grandparents lived in and were driven out of in the 50s by a demographic change that caused problems for their oldest child. And this fellow had been living there for more than 60 years, and he had 60 years of junk in the basement, like newspapers stacked to the ceiling, that we like walked down this little narrow area, and then there was like 7 elaborate train sets set up, which was really cool. And then he just had like sheet metal gun lockers that all of the guns were in, and we did the paperwork and it went pretty smoothly. And he had the biggest collection of broom handle Mausers, strange Chinese like warlord pistols, and then Inglis high powers. He had every variant of Inglis high power, as well as every variant of Webley that I've ever seen in my life. He had at least 24 Webleys. So I got to play with all those things very carefully while he did the paperwork on a Steyr M40 for me.
Well, on that note, and that is the archetypal home-based FFL, but I actually have a home-based FFL customer. story. So, like I said, 99% of my customers are all totally cool. So and this is actually recent. I had a very old chiropractor buy a C Camp 32 caliber pistol a couple weeks ago.
Interesting.
And
How
so,
depressed is he? Is he like looking for a way out?
and so he had already been, over. He's been through the process. He knows where my location is. He's sat in the chair in my office directly in front of me. And then 2 weeks later, he comes back. And in the interim, I had taken down the sign off my door because I'm in the process of shutting down. Of course, he takes the last time slot and is late. And then pulls his car up in the driveway. And I guess he notices the sign is gone, and that confused the shit out of him. And he left, came back another 20 minutes later. So he's ultra late. Comes in, and of course, as an entitled boomer, just has cops an attitude. But whatever, I sit him down, get through the process, only to realize, sure enough, we can't even transfer the gun because there's a one handgun per 30-day limit. So anyway, he leaves, and I think while he was pissing me off, me being professional and polite, I was trying to tell him to fuck off politely. So I told him, hey, in the future, you might be better served going somewhere else, meaning a gun store, so that I don't have to deal with you. And he subsequently, I just want to read what he wrote. Last night, when I had a very difficult time trying to locate your business due to poor illumination and the fact that you removed your sign, you mentioned you were going out of business. I agree that it would be preferable, safer, and more compliant than trying to run a quasi gun shop out of your basement. And so I'm interested in purchasing your business. And he made me an offer. It really blew me away. But that's the worst case example of who you're going to run into, aside from the G2C buyers, as a home-based FFL. So just if you're planning on starting an FFL business, just grow a thick skin, because you are going to get insulted by the boomer class.
It's funny you bring that up, because this actually is, there's Brian Ziske in chat telling a story very similar to one I experienced about a guy trying to break in and steal from an FFL. So during a brief period last year, I would call it kind of like early onset Alzheimer's. I thought I was a SIG 229 guy, found out I was not very quickly. But I picked one of these up, police surplus. I think I paid $300 for it. Not a bad deal, right? When I was doing the paperwork, the police come in, and they're talking to the owner. So I'm not trying to eavesdrop, but after they leave, I ask. And this is one of those indoor ranges, right, where you can rent guns or whatever. And apparently, this aspiring astrophysicist had rented a gun, put it in his book bag, and just left, and then robbed a store with it. And as I'm sure you're aware, both Karl and Aardwolf here, you have to, when you rent a gun at a gun store, show them your ID. So he had, skated, he'd gotten out of the store he'd knocked over, and the police, kind of putting two and two together, figured like, oh, wait a minute, this is what happened. We got called about it. That this gun was stolen. A guy with a gun that matched the same description robbed the store, right? And they really show up, get a photocopy of his driver's license, and leave, and apprehend him within 15 minutes. Point being, it was an astonishingly stupid crime, right? Really just not our best and brightest. So point is, you hear interesting stuff when you go to small businesses. But guys, I'm going to have to run. It was great speaking to both of you. Again, deeply sorry, obviously, to all my Virginians. Not my idea, but nonetheless, here we are.
Keep your head up.
Thank y'all so much. Yeah, really. Keep your head up. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Everyone at home, as Karl said, keep your head up.